welcome. It's Elite Business Live here in the heart of London. And if you're joining us or catching up, welcome to you. And an especially warm welcome to our audience here in the shadow of St. Paul's Cathedral. With our hearts beating fast, we've been listening to Dr. Alka Patel, and we continue thinking about people and what makes them tick now with an all-star cast of guests here and also joining us online. I'll quickly tell you who they are, and we've got one of them joining virtually, but welcome one, welcome all. Af Malhotra is the founder of Diversity Economics AI. Also, I have him to thank for a life-changing trip to India as a co-founder of Tech India.
Indeed.
Yeah. Always good to see you, Af. Welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, next to you, and welcome back to Elite Business Live, Judith Germain. Very nice to see you. Founder of the Maverick Paradox. We'll find out what that means, but in essence, a multi-award-winning leadership consultant, and very happy to have your advice and wisdom with us again. Thank you, Judith, for being with us. Christian, an entrepreneur, a co-founder in the property realm. Christian Byfield is the co-founder and mission commander of the Depository. So it's very good to see you. We'll dig into what you're up to, so thank you. Rachel Morgan Trimmer leads Firebird, which is a consultancy working with some amazing organizations specifically to help them think about neurodiversity. Thank you, Rachel, for being with us. And joining us online, we say good day to Alex Partridge, who is the founder of Unilad and Lad Bible as well, and the host of ADHD Chatter. I hope you can hear us, Alex.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for making time. By the way, as I was doing my homework, I saw a comment by one of you who should remain nameless. One of you on the panel, could be you, Alex, who said that this topic on inclusion could seem dry and dull. Can't believe it. What do we say to that panelist who shall remain nameless? Rachel.
Well, I think if people think that inclusion is dry and dull, the first thing I would say to them is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that your experience has been that, because the people who were trying to educate you haven't been inclusive to you. Yeah. They haven't been considering your needs, that things should be interesting, that they should be fun. And that's what inclusion is about. It's not supposed to be dry and dull and boring. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be interesting.
Yeah. And when you deliver some of your workshops and training, Rachel, what's the feedback you're really after from the leadership team? What do you want them to say afterwards in the corridor to you?
Well, the things that they say, which really mean a lot to me, is that they feel empowered. Yeah. Because I get clients coming to me saying, oh, we want to do neurodiversity, we're not really sure, we don't want to offend anyone, we might say the wrong thing, we don't know where to start. That's quite common. But after a training session, after they've learned a bit more about it, after they've understood what it means and the strengths and challenges of neurodivergent people, they go, oh, well, that doesn't seem so hard. That's certainly not boring. We've just been playing Buckaroo. And then they feel like, yeah, this is something we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Alex, your work not traditionally associated with the words dry and dull. What do you say to that cheeky skeptic?
Well, it's an interesting comment. I would argue, and I would counter to say that the conversation as a business owner with your accountant wondering why your profit margin isn't as high as it could be because 20% of your staff are leaving within 3 months, and all of that money you're spending on hiring and training is having to be respent. Yeah. So many people with ADHD and other neurodivergent conditions, there's nothing funny about coming into work every day with that internalized hyperactivity, those 10 highly caffeinated squirrels barreling around inside your head. And if not understood and accommodated, that can create this overwhelm that can physically paralyze someone. And that in the office looks like, potentially, to someone who doesn't understand, laziness or low productivity. And therefore, that person will be on the receiving end of negative comments. They'll be so unhappy and they'll leave.
Yes.
That's the reality of unaccommodated neurodivergent conditions and the cost of not being inclusive in the workplace.
And in terms of that rallying call, Judith, let's build on that. And by the way, some of us will now be thinking of squirrels drinking coffee, but that's fine. Judith, it isn't dull at all.
No, I think what I would say to leaders who say that is that your staff probably thinks you're so self-interested that it's not worth being in that organisation. Because if you can only have empathy for something you have lived in or lived through, then that's not empathy, that's self-interest. Right. And who wants to work with a self-interested leader?
Right, here's to that. Christian, this is something you've lived through. You've built a company using some of these frameworks and with diversity at its core. But explain a bit how and why.
I think I managed to slightly cheat the system, and I think that was by who I chose to be my business partner, or rather, who my business partner chose for me. When I started my first business, a lettings agency. I founded that business with an incredible woman called Anne Dekkers, which is a lady from Antwerp, who's part of the LGBTQ community. In fact, just got married to her wife at Christmas. And that kind of baked that into really what our business was about. It was that decision of us becoming business partners. At no point was there any consideration about, do I want a woman as a business partner? Do I want someone who's part of the LGBTQ community as part of my business? It was very simply, does this person bring a different skill set and a different attitude to the business? Because again, you don't need a business partner that is identical to you. Otherwise, why do you need a business partner that's just going to back that up? And coming back to the point of the possible dryness of diversity, I can't think of anything drier than having 10 identical people sat around a table, having the same ideas and patting each other on the back for how clever they all are. That, to me, is the definition of the most boring meeting you can ever have.
Boring, smug meeting, yeah. So Af, and what do you say in that sense, rather than saying, no, don't send your ex-officer to this. This is for everybody.
Yeah.
How do we get everyone back in the room?
You know what? It's a great question, by the way, and just a bit of fun. Watching paint dry back in the day is dull. I get that. You've got my full support. And even that could be made interesting with TikTok these days. DEI is not dull. And it's not dull because it's about all of us in this room. We're all different. Actually, in fact, quick one. How many people in this room, if you raise your hands, believe that you're different or diverse? Anyway, thoughts, ideas, expressions, experiences. There we go. It's bloody interesting. And a final point I just want to make, Ollie. My software engineer, who's a young black man from Nigeria, been in this country for many, many years, he was trying to look for a job before he came working for us for a number of years. Wasn't able to get a job. His talent wasn't recognized. Self-taught, gifted, neurodiverse, genius AI engineer. We found him. We worked really hard. We discovered him. We found him. His life has changed because of the gig he's working in right now. He's building our AI. And DEI is serious. It's life-changing. It is anything but dull.
Right, well, here's that. But I was very drawn by what you're up to in the business.
Yeah.
Social intelligence AI. Just give us a quick snapshot, because I know it will feed into what we're going to discuss.
Yeah. So you have something called ESG, which is an acronym which will probably die away like perhaps the acronym that is DEI, and will be reborn. The S in ESG is about things like diversity, equity, inclusion that are being measured, human rights, supplier diversity, talent, labor management, data privacy. These are aspects of the social aspect of ESG that companies are reporting on and have been for a few years. There is no single place to find that information. They're hidden in filings in thousands and thousands of websites around the world. We're bringing all of that together with generative AI.
Got it. No, thank you. I want to hear what you've discovered along the way. Open question to all of you, and I think this is the sort of elephant in the room question, so forgive me, I'll try to ask it sensitively. It feels, or it can feel, like DEI has become this target, especially of negativity, especially in the last month or so. Political insults, firing across the country and the world, huge corporations pulling their programs. So, at Elite Business Live, we like being pithy and blunt. What is going on?
Well, should we look at one of the world's biggest companies, Apple, where their shareholders resoundingly stuck with their DEI strategy because they know it delivers in one of the most successful and largest businesses on the planet. And I don't know if that doesn't ratify it for a lot of people, I'm not entirely sure what will.
So sticking to their guns, excuse the phrase.
Look, I think there's a lot of data behind. You can look at this from a social aspect. That actually, if we focus on the purpose why most of you are here today at an elite business conference, is that you want to build a better business. And the fact of the matter is, if you get away from any social or media dialogue around it, and if you just look at the data, the very simple fact of the matter is, and it plays out unanimously across all sizes and across all sectors, is that diverse businesses are more profitable, more robust. Yes. They adapt quicker to changing markets. And if you don't want a better business, if you do it for no other reason, do it just to have a better business.
So in that case, others, why are some of the world's most successful companies pulling the programs that were designed to enforce exactly what Christian's talking about? What's going on?
I think personally, the real thing here is about control and fear. You know, the data is there, the evidence is there. We know, more diverse workplaces, make more money, more innovative. But what it is that it's an unspoken dialogue where we've had in the past positive discrimination for people that may not have been skilled. And I'm talking about, if you look at the States, we can talk about legacy. We're talking about white individuals that, had previous people who've gone to the top universities, they get a buy-in. But now we've got a situation where we're rising to the point where you have different skilled people, different abilities. And that can be quite scary for a majority who are used to being able to walk into a situation and take control of it.
But back to this fear point. Alex, I'll bring you in momentarily. Rachel, what is going on? And I wonder to what extent you've seen that in the companies you're working with.
I don't see a great deal of it because obviously the companies I work with are kind of, 10 steps ahead.
They've self-selected to be interested.
Yeah, exactly. But my personal feeling is that this backlash is just part of how things work. And we've seen it before, haven't we? We've seen it with civil rights activists, women's rights activists, LGBTQ people. Every time there's one of these movements, there's a backlash. So I'm quite optimistic, actually. I think it will blow over.
Okay, Alex?
Well, you've got a particular man who's moved into the White House, and in a very short space of time, he's put out these big statements to try and appease his core voter base, to show the contrast between the previous party and this party. And, very right-wing, who's in the White House now. Some say DE&I is very left-wing. So it's in the crosshairs. We're not the first marginalised community to be in the crosshairs and be politicised for the purpose of a politician to make political gain. What's so important is when we are under attack like this, not the first time, and certainly won't be the last time, that we come together and we rise up and we find strength and we realise that there's safety and forward progression in numbers.
Right.
It's just rhetoric, political rhetoric, and it has to be looked at that. Of course, the real world consequences are, unfortunately, more stigma, more stereotyping, more discrimination, more bullying. Awareness has to be raised to show that it is simply political rhetoric, and as a community we have to come together and be strong in the face of it.
Yeah,
so we don't. On the back of that, though, I think what we're seeing happening with Tesla is a very real-world example of the reaction. We've got a company that is the most outspoken advocate of
hugely down,
rolling back, and I think you're seeing. We talked about Apple before. Yeah. We're talking about one of the biggest global brands at the moment, and how that is being very negatively impacted by their attitudes.
Well, they do have one very famous new customer as of this morning. But to what extent is this just seen through a sort of US-UK lens? How is it playing out globally? You have multiple conversations across all countries.
Yeah, indeed. I just want to start by saying, look, this is politics, and politics is about cycles. So the pendulum's gone on one side, it will come back again. Music analogy is the DEI music was quite loud for the last 3 or 4 years. It's now being turned down. The notes are being removed, new notes are being added, a riff's being added, and over time the volume will go back up. It's as simple as that. I don't think we need to panic. Let me just put this into context. There are 50,000 listed companies on the planet. About 4,500 of them sit in the United States, 1,500 in the UK, 6,000 or so in Europe. Okay, those are the numbers. In the S&P 500, which is the United States, 500 companies, admittedly, the 500 most powerful and largest companies, including Apple, some of those companies have decided to repurpose, rebrand, re-architect, rewire their existing DEI strategies. But let me tell you the data, because of course we study this day in, day out. You have companies, Apple, Costco, NFL, Delta, all of these companies are staying their ground, investing even more, not in DEI, but in new words, employee empowerment, talent empowerment. And that is a great thing. In fact, some companies are spending more money. DEI was always about employee engagement. It was always about making employees feel like they belong, they're included. There is a cluster of those employees that are blatantly DEI employees because they sit in the communities that we've defined. These communities will become open source soon. So diversity, by the way, before I finish, diversity for me should not be spelt with a TY. It should be spelt with a TEE. T stands for thoughts, E stands for expressions, and the other E stands for experiences. That's what it's about. That's why you're all diverse. It's not just about the way I look.
Thank you, Af. So on that final E of experiences, right? Let's zoom in a bit. Let's add a new melody, if you like, on neurodiversity. Okay, and here my challenge is, Rachel, how to make our Elite Business Live guests think clearly about attracting neurodiverse individuals or individuals with neurodivergence to their organization, and almost whether they might be doing or not doing certain things at the moment which might attract, or doing things which might off-put. So just help us into that particular thing.
Well, I think the first thing to talk about is why are we doing this? Why do we want neurodivergent people specifically? Neurodivergent people are the only skills-based marginalised group. So when you get neurodivergent people in, you're getting specific talents, specific skills. And the other really cool thing is that if you hire for neurodiversity, if you hire in a neurodivergent-friendly way, you reduce other hiring biases. So you will find more diversity across the board just because your process looks a lot friendlier, not just to neurodivergent people, but to everybody. So there's lots of things that you can do around attracting neurodivergent talent. And it's not enough to do that little paragraph at the bottom of your job ad saying we are diverse and inclusive and you have to show it. You can say anything that you want, but people are looking for you to put it into action. So for example, keeping the job ad short and then adding links that read more about the company for those autistic people who want to deep dive. I'm autistic, by the way, and I sometimes go down those rabbit holes. But then keeping the process shorter for those who might be dyslexic, might have ADHD. And then what about having videos? What about having pictures? What about giving the interview questions in advance? What about offering things instead of waiting for people to ask you, which is one of my bugbears. They say, if you've got any special needs, access needs, tell us. And I was like, well, you don't ask normal people. Why do I have to do that? Why don't you put everything there, what you've got available, and then, I'll take it if I need it.
Helpful.
And leave it if not.
Thank you. And I realise we could dive right into this, but just flipping that around briefly, Alex, for our existing employees who are neurodivergent, things that we ought to be thinking more about to help them to thrive, that some of us might overlook?
I think I truly believe it's about recognizing your own internal biases and understanding what it actually means to have some of these neurodivergent conditions. If you had a psychologist here today, they'd tell you that, for example, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by traits of impulsivity, forgetfulness, and disorganization. But you have to dive deeper into it than that and look at the consequences of a lifetime of struggling with those executive function challenges and the emotional knock-on effects of what that causes. ADHD is really a lifetime of being told that you're too much or too sensitive and not understanding why you have to put on this mask and change your entire personality to be more palatable for whoever you're stood in front of on any given day. It's not understanding why you're so sensitive to rejection and the things you put in place that are really detrimental to your own well-being and professional progression to avoid a rejection or a criticism. The people-pleasing, the struggling with boundaries, the overcommitting and saying yes too much. It's really about showing that you understand all of these things as a business and as a corporation. And not just saying, you can put a little thing at the bottom of the advert, and that's all well and good. But you really have to show actively, proactively, like show that you're not just wanting to tolerate, but you're really wanting to understand and accept and recognise that when this does happen, strengths associated with doing so are really, really big.
Thank you, Alex. So I mean, the challenge is, right, we're going to get beaten by the clock. So let's have questions from the room. But I will kick off with one from online here. Very interesting. One of the great employers in the UK, Tamara Littleton, is with us. I think you'll like this question, Tamara. I'm a small business owner. I hire freelancers on a casual basis. I don't have a solid full-time team, but what are some simple ways I can make my workers feel included? So I guess there's that sense that they're missing perhaps that face-to-face opportunity. What other ways, Af?
Yeah, I can come in. Well, I'm doing it right now. So we have a startup team. We had a physical office. We got rid of it, and everyone wants to work virtual. Few things. I think the first thing is we have something in our business called the DE Way. Diversity Economics is our business. The DE Way. It's a 2-page document with 9 really important traits that makes up our culture. And every single person who joins the team is part of this charter. We talk about it. We discuss it. We explain why it's good to have a growth mindset, or why it's so important to listen and not interrupt, so on and so forth. Simple things like this. And I think we do, every 2 weeks we do recognition. So even if you're a freelancer, you get recognized for your drive, your hard work, your, the fact that you moved a ticket from point A to point B, and so on and so forth. Freelancers are the future of the gig economy. Really, they are. This is going to be a hard gig, though, Ollie, for leaders, because we haven't been trained to lead in this.
Any other thoughts on building culture on that? Rachel, did you want to come in on that, on building culture, especially remotely, possibly?
Yeah, I think when you're building an inclusive culture, it has to come from the top and it has to come from the heart. You have to care about it, otherwise it's just not going to work. So when it comes to, when it comes to building inclusion, I mean, when it comes to learning about this stuff, I can teach you anything you want to know about neurodiversity, but I can't teach you to care. But one of the great things about today's event is that everybody here already cares.
Yeah,
and that's
100%.
absolutely brilliant.
100%. Let's take a question from the room. How about just here in the second row, and then we'll come in the middle. While the mic is moving, Judith, pithy question. What are some ways I can attract more diverse talent to my business? I just want a practical tip here, because we've had a lot on how to reframe our thinking. What would you say?
I think it's a lot to do with language, because if you think about neurodiversity people tend to be hypervigilant. So what can they see? So what's in your words in the advert? What are you actually saying? What's in the videos? If you look at all the different types of neurodiversity, are you actually playing out into that? Yeah. And really I think that's the real practical tip.
Yeah, and thank you for being brief on that. Thank you. Question from the second row. Welcome.
Hi, my name's Hazel. I work for an organisation called Black Lives in Music, looking at more equity in the music business. I suppose the question is more to everybody. If we're looking at it from businesses who are trying to make money in a capitalist society, and then you took away all the women who were consumers, and you took away all the people who were not white who were consumers, and then you took away all the people who were neurodiverse who were consumers, how would you make your money?
Yeah, it's an extremely good point. I mean, it could have many answers, but Christian.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've coined it. You've coined the answer in the question. Really, you've kind of cheated us and answered your own question. But I think fundamentally, look at whether you're selling a product or a service. Who are you hoping are going to buy it? And if you're only looking for 40-plus-year-old white British men to buy your product, great, build that team. Yeah. But if you're hoping more than that is going to buy it, then you really should have a team that reflects who your target marketplace is.
Judith,
because they're going to understand the attractions, the motivations, the desirable language, the calls to action that are going to be relevant to their particular sector of demographic.
Thank you. What I would just add is that over 50% of creative people are neurodivergent. So that is your audience, is that 50%. So what I would say is to spend time with the neurodivergent and understand neurodivergent to see what it is that they want. But the creative industry is full of neurodivergence. It's the highest population of neurodivergent people in any industry.
Interesting. Let's get another question from the studio here. Should we go to the front row? Is that okay? Forgive me, I can't come to everybody. We'll just get we're going to run out of time. Thank you.
Hi there, guys. I'm Dan Newman, founder of Baldylocks. And I'm kind of curious, really, when it comes to understanding that employers and employees of today were students of yesterday. And so I'm kind of curious from the panel, when we're looking at the schooling system, how far along do you think we are in making sure inclusion is really taking place effectively there to nurture the next generation of employers and employees?
What a fascinating question. So Alex, online, did you catch the question? How far along is the schooling system in ensuring the next generation of inclusive leaders?
I speak a lot in schools. Schools, I think, are a trauma factory for neurodivergent kids. The will is there from the teachers to understand. There's just a long way to go still in terms of budget and putting resources in place. I think having a dialogue between the parents or guardians and the school can be a massive contributing factor to spotting neurodivergent conditions earlier. I had my first anxiety attack when I was 6 in a classroom. My presentation in the classroom was very anxious, very shut down, compared to when I was in my bedroom at home. I was creating businesses at a super young age. That juxtaposition between how I was presenting in environment A and environment B, if that had been picked up earlier, there could have been an intervention at an earlier age, and I could have fostered my strengths at a much younger age.
I think there's a dichotomy. In terms of awareness, super along the path. You'll go into any secondary school, even primary schools, lots of talk about different types of neurodiversity, different types of everything.
Yeah.
But to actually, back to what Alex was saying, to actually help students requires a diagnosis, often when it comes to neurodiversity, and local government doesn't tend to want to give diagnosis, so then it becomes a trauma factory.
There is a huge part of behavioral psychology here, by the way, which I think doesn't get talked about enough. And I think it's not just about schools, but about parents. And I think it all starts at home. There has to be a concerted effort to ensure that parents raise their game and are educated as much as the teachers are, because of course it's a symbiosis between the teacher and the parent. So I love the conversation, but I think the parents are totally lost and missed out of this dialogue.
Do you know, thank you, Af. Every single one of you has given us such great food for thought. We're very grateful. The clock has beaten us. The one rule of Elite Business Live is we have to stick to time because we've got so much more good stuff to come. If you'll stay with us, we're going to grill you backstage with Hannah, who's waiting in the wings. But Alex, thank you for joining us online and being absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Judith. Always good to see you. And Af, always an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much indeed, one and all. And as our guests leave the stage, I'm only sorry we couldn't get even more of those brilliant questions in, but very grateful to them indeed. Thank you, one and all. They're going to go and see Hannah. I've got a couple of quick notes on what is happening alongside these main stage sessions. By the way, on this stage will be the brilliant Sam Smith. She took FinCap into a 50 million plus company, listed it on the London Stock Exchange. She's the founder of the Superscalers, which she'll be talking about today. And then we'll have a panel on the untold story of gendered funding, and that is just after 2:30 on this main stage, including, by the way, Richard Bearman from the British Business Bank, and Sam Smith will join that conversation as well. Meanwhile, on those breakout sessions, just FYI, Dave Stubberfield can show you how to use techniques for embedding customer-centric change into daily business practices without disrupting workflows. So have a look that. If you want to join that, either here or in your tab, in the What's On tab. And by the way, if you're in our studio audience, they're all in the Milton suite for that breakout there. So by the way, in a minute, I'm going to hand over to Hannah, but just to say we're going to be back here after a real break, just after 2:00. So lots more, but I would say whether you're online or here in London, part of the reason we do Elite Business Live is to make connections. So obviously it's easy to say hello if you're physically here, but whether you're here or online, please use that hashtag EBL event or EBL 2025, forgive me, EBL 2025, just to try and help us join dots across some really interesting people. We're going to hand back over. Hannah, are you reading me? I hope you've been tuned into that.
Loud and clear, yes, Ollie. Waiting in the wings here to grill our panellists a little bit further. But a really fascinating chat, and I think such a topical issue. And as you say, I was keeping a close eye on the Tesla share price too. So,
and you all have seen all the questions we didn't get round to, but please, over to you, Hannah. Good luck. We will compare notes over lunch. Thank you.
Super, thank you, Ollie. Judith, thank you so much for joining me. So one of the things I want to think about backstage is how do you talk about this discussion authentically? And it's something that I see around me, naming no names, but particularly like middle-aged white men find it really hard to talk about diversity in a really authentic way. Would that be your interpretation too?
Yeah, I think the problem isn't necessarily about authentic. It can be a worry to offend, and not being sure what to say or how to say it because language moves a lot. And I think sometimes there's an underlying concern that diversity means less able. So to be able to speak authentically, I think, is to understand what is the gain that you want to do, what's the message you want to put out, and actually just speak from the heart.
Yeah, no, really great advice. And what about, so if you are a sole trader or a really small business, and actually so far your business isn't particularly diverse, and you are talking to prospective new employees, because often new employees want to join companies that reflect them or that they can see themselves fitting in. So how do you tackle that?
I think we take the conversation away from let's be diverse to let's make sure you belong.
Yeah.
So you're immediately opening up the conversation. And I think there's where you speak. So you actually ask people, what is it that you like doing? What issue, what things that you want us to work with you through. So somebody might be autistic, for example, who will say, I actually prefer very clear instructions. Or if we're going to change task, I'd like to be given a 10-minute warning. So one of the things that's quite common is sometimes like you might say, I want to talk to you later about X, and that person is sitting there worried. But if you can say, there's nothing to worry about, I just want to talk about this issue here, then they're less worried. So I think it comes down to active listening, understanding what needs to be required.
And it does have to be, thought about by the top brass, right?
Yes.
It can't just be something a slightly larger organisation where you've got an HR person to do this for you. You can be like, oh, the HR person will take care of that. I don't need to worry about it as a CEO.
Yeah, so when you think that 1 in 7 people are neurodiverse anyway, which is a high percentage, and then you think that we are all around neurodiverse people, we need to start from the top, and we need to be much more aware because we are likely to be surrounded by neurodiversity, especially if you're in a creative industry, because where your employees or your customers, 50% of them are likely to be neurodiverse.
So it's about opening up that kind of customer base as well, isn't it? Judith, thank you so much. We are really short of time today, but thank you for joining us backstage and on stage earlier. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank
you. Hello, please come and join me on the stage. So, Rachel, I really liked one of your comments earlier. I thought it was very optimistic. It'll all blow over. So we're going to hold you to that, and we're going to hope that is right. We hope you're gazing into your crystal ball, and that's absolutely correct. My interpretation of the situation seems to be that perhaps it's the acronyms and the terms that have been associated with this slightly kind of toxic narrative. And perhaps things won't change for the worse, and it's just that the language needs to evolve. What would you say to that?
I think that's an interesting question. When it comes to diversity and inclusion, I think you talk about the acronyms and things like that. I think what's behind that is perhaps a lack of understanding, because what we know is that if you're only surrounded by people like you, which many people are, and it's not their fault, and we shouldn't be blaming them for that, but if you're surrounded by people who are like you, you don't necessarily understand, different people's experiences or different ways of behaving, different ways of experiencing the world. And I think once you actually start to meet and have these open, transparent conversations with people who are different, that's where the understanding comes from. It's not necessarily about, understanding the acronyms or reading things in the press about, sometimes the press is quite negative around neurodiversity, but about meeting people one-to-one. And I think we as neurodiversity advocates have a certain responsibility to encourage that open, transparent conversation. We need to give people the permission to get it wrong, to say the wrong thing. And because we know that's coming from a place of learning. So instead of getting offended, do you know what? I don't know how people have the time to get offended. I'm way too busy. But, just letting them say those things, understanding that they're learning, they're trying to get it right, and just creating a more nurturing and compassionate and open dialogue.
Oh, such a powerful point. Thank you so much. I'm afraid the clock has beaten us, but thank you so much for joining us here today. Last but not least, come and join me. Hello. We have 2 minutes left, I can hear in my ear. So what I'd love to understand from your perspective is how you've taken good care of yourself. Bit of a curveball here for you. But we heard earlier from Dr. Alka, and she was talking about this the million-hour life, for example. You've had a really impressive career. How do you make sure you live for 1 million hours?
Wow. The first one is I talk about making friends with uncertainty, okay? And the big question is always when you're making friends with uncertainty, how the hell do you do that? Well, you have to have certainty. Where does that come from? From home. Your wife, your partner, your family, and your kids. That's your stability. So I'm blessed with an incredible family and my partner, and that's where I get my certainty to be coping with and deal with uncertainty. And those million hours are just part and parcel of that journey. The final thing I would say is if you wake up in the morning and you've got a sense of purpose, okay, whatever that may be, it could be a child, it could be your partner, it could be a mission larger than life, you will have the passion, the drive to keep going, so you'll see progress, you will see results, so you'll see some performance, and finally, the possibilities that will come your way will be endless. So you've got to have purpose, you've got to have a why.
And can you remember a time in your career where things haven't gone quite right and that you've had to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep going?
I have a distressing health past and a lot of trauma when it comes to health. Been on many hospital beds. 1, 2, I'm an entrepreneur, a second time over. So I've taken it all on at the same time. So standing up and dusting yourself and fighting for another day and living for another day and with that purpose is part and parcel of my life. I wouldn't recommend entrepreneurship to everyone, and not a lot of people say that because it is really quite a high stress, complex domain. But if it's part of your DNA, it's what your family did, it's what you believe you're really meant to be doing in your life, then go for it. But that's my mindset. The final thing I'd say is you have to be, and I try my best to master reframing. When something goes wrong, you reframe it so it's good. It becomes good for you. And compare yourself with people who don't have what you have. God forbid I fell ill at some point. I said, well, at least I don't have this. And that's not a permanent illness that I have. Or I didn't do my funding rounds. And I was like, that's okay, but at least I've got some money in the bank. And so you've got to reframe as much as you can.
I love that. Absolutely buy into that too. Thank you so much. Great note to end on. Thank you very much.